The Portland Trailblazers sure are going to be a basketball team this year. Welcome in or welcome back. Today we're talking about the Portland Trailblazers. And I don't think it's going to be a fun conversation, not for me who appreciates good basketball, but also for the Trailblazer fans who are not going to have really anything to look forward to this year. I want to start with the bad and then we'll move on to the good. The bad is pretty bad, though. After the Damian Lillard trade and after the acquisition of Malcolm Brogdon and you had Drew Holiday for a little bit, it made some sort of sense to just ship everything away and see what you could get in return. The problem is that the pieces that are there now and what you got in return aren't that great. Some of it is really just a timing issue. I think that Jeremy Grant is a great basketball player, but two things. One, he is making too much money for this bad basketball team. And number two, he doesn't fit the timeline of the rest of the young core, like a Scoot Henderson or an Anthony Simons. And his front court mate, DeAndre Ayton, still hasn't proven to me that he deserved to be that number one pick in 2018, especially over someone like Luka Doncic. But it's kind of almost too late. It doesn't seem like he has ever really been willing to develop his game in such a way where it is conducive to a current offense, like an up-to-date, a modern offense. And it's really going to hurt down the line because the rest of the center depth doesn't do the things that NBA centers need to do. I'm a Celtics fan here, so of course I'm a big fan of Robert Williams, but he has been so injury prone over the years that I'm not sure that there's actually a realistic scenario where he plays 60 plus games this year. So while I do think he could be a very good starting center while healthy, and even if he isn't healthy, a good backup, I'm just not sure how many actual minutes that are going to be played on the court this year for him. And the last real bad thing, I promise, is Scoot Henderson. I don't think that he's bad. I also don't think that he's great. I think toward the end of the year, he was starting to figure some things out, and I think he was really getting comfortable in what was a very long season for him. But I also don't think that he proved enough during that season to warrant some sort of carte blanche acceptance into whatever he decides to do on a basketball floor this year. I think that he really needs to lock in and learn how to be a basketball player before he goes and has full reign of whatever he wants to do. Because while he is listed as the point guard, a lot of the ball handling responsibilities last year was handed to Anthony Simons. And Anthony Simons is good. He's a bucket getter. He's a decent facilitator. I just don't think that it's very conducive to have your point guard not have the ball. And he struggled a lot. Scoot Henderson struggled a lot last year with keeping the ball in the half-court offense. And don't get me wrong, there were very bright flashes of superstardom written all over him during the season, but they were few and far between. For every 27-point game that he had with 9 assists, there were games where he shot 2 for 12 and had an awful night. So now, we're done with the bad. On to the good. Anthony Simons. I think that he sort of messes up this young timeline maybe just a little bit, but I think that he is still young enough to keep on this team. In my head, how I'm viewing this is you're trying to build around Scoot Henderson and what he could be, and someone else we're going to talk about later, Donovan Clingan. If Anthony Simons fits into that, I think that would be great for the future, but I think at minimum, if he doesn't fit the timeline, if he is too advanced for Scoot and Donovan, I think there's a chance that you can flip him to something and get a ton of assets back. I can see a real scenario where a contender really needs a scoring punch for their shooting guard spot, and they could offer up 3 or 4 first-round picks for him. I just don't think that's going to be this year. I think this year specifically, it's going to be a lot of Anthony Simons ball. I think that Anthony may very well average 30. It's just not going to turn into wins. And I think that Denny Advia was a really good pickup as well. He was absolutely figuring it out in Washington, and while I think it was unfortunate that they traded him away while he was figuring it out, I think it's really good fortune for the Trailblazers. And to be able to pick up Donovan Clingan at the point in the draft that you did, I think was super valuable. I was sure there were so many mock drafts that were up in the air. They weren't sure who was going to go number 1 or who was going to go number 10. A lot of mock drafts that I saw, and even on my personal board, had Donovan Clingan in the top 3. So to be able to pick him up where you did was great. It did raise questions to me at that exact moment of, okay, if you're drafting him, what are we doing with DeAndre Ayton? And I had the summer to think about it, and I thought, okay, well, if a trade was going to happen, it's probably going to happen right before the season. And here we are 10 days out from the season, and no trade has happened yet. So I think that front court fit's going to be really clunky, but Donovan proved to me while he was playing at UConn that he definitely has the ability to be this next generation center. He's not going to be this Jokic. He's not going to be a Kristaps Porzingis. He's not going to be a Joel Embiid. What he is going to be at a very bare minimum is a great connector. If you were watching those UConn games, if you were watching a Dan Hurley offense, he ran a lot of things through the center, through Donovan. And while his assist numbers weren't something of a Domantas Sabonis or an Alperen Şengün, he was the very motor. He was the absolute facilitator for that team. They run a lot of high post offense, a lot of blind pig action. So when you toss it into the big, he is able to see the floor and be able to make reads off of that. And Donovan almost always seemed to make the right read. Even if it wasn't a pass that led directly to an assist, that person got somebody else open for an assist. It's not going to show up in a stat book, but Donovan Clingan would have probably had to lead the NCAA last year in hockey assists. And that's just something that I like from his game. What I think he's actually really good at is his around rim finishing, his defensive acumen, his shot blocking ability. I think that those things are his calling card, and I think that his playmaking ability is just the icing on top. I think at some point this year, there is going to be a trade, whether that be for a Jeremy Grant or a DeAndre Ayton or even an Anthony Simons. And at that point, I would assume around January, maybe the All-Star break, I would have to assume that at that point you really lean into the Scoot Henderson, Donovan Clingan duo, and you just ride that out. I don't think that we should expect that the Trailblazers are going to win even 30 games. I think that we need to lock in mentally that this is going to be a rebuilding season, but I do like some of the building blocks. I think that as long as you are allowing Scoot to work through his mistakes and he actually learns from them, and the path that I think Donovan Clingan is already on to be a great center in the NBA, I think those are really two great foundational pieces that could build into something great in the future. Do we have any Trailblazer fans here? Let me know down in the comments below. Check my link tree while you're at it. Join the Discord. Be kind. Tell somebody you love them. And I'll see you tomorrow.